My name is Elborz Mazanderan. I graduated UMBC in 2019. I currently work full-time as a government affairs analyst at a company called Elborz. We're a defense contractor. A lot of other countries, you don't have the opportunity to be as interactive with the population and the population to the government. So I would say it comes down to leveraging the connection that the country has with its people to best make those people's lives better. What is my first memory of being civically engaged? I would say it's not a particular memory, but the earliest I can go back is, my mother was an elementary school teacher. The polling place in our neighborhood was my school. So I would have off, she would have off every election day, every 2 years, right? Not just for the presidentials, right? But that was the one that we would go to for the state elections and everything, and the congressional, midterms. My parents would always take me with them into the booth while they were casting their votes. And so maybe by the age of 5, they said, hey, this is back when Maryland had voting machines. Do you want to press the button on the little tablet? Carry that over the course of the next 13 years. By the time I'm 18, when I'm casting my own vote, it's a very momentous thing, not because I've never engaged in the process before, but I'm expressing my own opinion, not just my parents' opinion. So I got to do it myself, and I think that's where it all started. Any other role models that engaged or inspired me for civic engagement? For the most part, it's a combination of historical figures and thankfully people who I've had as personal mentors. In the former camp, it's everybody that you would think of, right? Learning about American history, people like, as diverse as Thomas Jefferson to Frederick Douglass, engaging with the law in a thoughtful manner in one way or the other, constructively or critically, at times. With respect to personal mentors, I understand it might come off as, a bit of flattery considering where I am, but professors that I had at this school, I think of Professor Cobran. He was an adjunct at the time. I don't know if he still is. I mean, he might be. You're nodding your head, so I'm going to take that as a yes. I got my first job on a campaign because of an email that he sent out to the class I was a part of. And that's really where my career started from, being able to go back that far on my resume. Professor Blake, constitutional law, all the courses that he taught, Professors Haggerty and Hody. I'm currently a graduate student at Georgetown studying security studies, partially as a result of their recommendation, not just to me, but also to the school. I mean, they wrote those letters. Now that I'm working in lobbying and advocacy, there are individuals that I can look up to in that regard as well. From the nonprofit perspective, previously I was working with the American Institute of Physics. I looked up to my boss, Jen Greenamore. She was a 15-year advocate for the sciences, and I thought, well, that's very admirable. I mean, she knows what she's doing on matters of making sure that the government, which she admits, and we all admit in my profession, it's not omniscient. You need to be able to translate what experts are saying. And so I've always looked up to her, a mentor turned professor of mine, Charles Carithers at Georgetown, who's a lobbyist. He's an association or firm lobbyist at Cornerstone Government Affairs. It's a diversity of people, none of whom have anything to do with each other, but they're all someone to learn from and somebody to draw inspiration from. It's probably easiest if I start backwards. What issues have I worked on professionally and personally? I'll start with the current one. Elborz is a defense contractor, so it's matters of defense, homeland security, as well as regulatory issues with the use of an emerging technology. We create a high-power microwave system, which needs regulation from the FCC, the NTIA, and the FAA because we have an impact on the national airspace system. So a broad set of transportation, telecommunication issues, as well as the smattering of security from a grand perspective, the foreign policy of trying to get our technologies unrestricted by ITAR, to just defense policy generally. How do we make sure that we're getting the right tools in the hands of the users that will eventually be defending the country with them, or another country, right? That's another concern. Before that, I was, again, at the American Institute of Physics. The scientific community, I have no ties to it in any regard. I'm not ponytail might make you think I'm a physicist. I'm not. I never took a class in this building. But science and policy are heavily linked historically in this country and in most of human history. Advances in technical or scientific capability have been political drivers. You know, I mean, #1 grossing movie right now is about a guy who created the atomic bomb, right? Which is great, by the way. I really recommend it. With respect to science policy, there are a number of things that you can engage on from the broader sense of, you know, what sciences are we investing in, which is a very big question. I represented physical scientists, so of course the astronomers wanted their cut, you know, the crystallographers wanted their cut, the physicists in medicine wanted their cut, you know. Also, workforce development, education issues. How do we make sure that we have a solid pipeline of scientists going in? You know, where does that come from? Well, the government is very highly involved. You're receiving grants to conduct research. Graduate students are going to be a part of those. How do you find employment gainfully while you're in school to the point where you can use that on your resume moving forward? That was an issue that I was paid to advocate for, right? And it wasn't my opinion. The reason that I had to register as a lobbyist is to say that this organization believes in me so much that they would want me representing them in front of their government. These views are not necessarily my own, but it is something that I appreciated. Before that, while I was in school and then moving, you know, into just my own personal beliefs, for the most part, it was issues about K-12 education. My mother, I said, was an educator, right? I genuinely care about making sure that our teachers receive the best that they can. And so it's been an invaluable experience from a professional perspective, being able to, you know, hone my skills as an advocate, given that it's what I do full time, to take that back to an issue that I care about for no structural reason. Nobody's giving me a paycheck to say this. I'm just saying, you know, go to the government. What can we do about these problems? These people deserve our best. Everybody can relate to the fact that at some point throughout their elementary, middle, or high school education, somebody made a difference in their life that put them on the path that got them to the perspective that they are at and the position that they're in. How can we reward that behavior, encourage it, and make sure that other people have a similar experience? How could college students get involved in science policy advocacy, national security advocacy? I would actually argue that they shouldn't. I think that they should pick whatever issue they want to be involved in and become involved in particularly that. This idea that, you know, oh, you're a single issue voter, that's such a negative thing. I don't necessarily agree with that. You know, if you have an opinion about something that is so strong, you know, you don't need to go and seek out, you know, well, the people who have that opinion, what else do they believe in? Should I start thinking that too? I mean, to a certain extent, that's very helpful, and it can help you form other choices, but certain things are things that a person inherently cares about. I gave the example of my mom being an elementary school teacher. That's something that I cared about. It's something that I pursued. If you can pick whatever you care about in the petite sense, say, this is where I line up, you will inevitably find there are organizations that agree, and there are organizations that fight specifically for that, and you can receive not only an education, but also a platform in trying to advocate for the particular things as opposed to the grand ones. If somebody does care about science policy, national security policy, first of all, it starts in the classroom. I would say a lot of it not just is a matter of education, but people who are academics in these fields, they have connections to people who do this work as practitioners as well. There's a strong interplay between, you know, the academic side of the world trying to figure out what is optimal, who are listened to or try to be listened to by the policymakers who are wondering, well, what should I do right now? You know, I said the government is not omniscient. So when you can interact with your professors in a positive way, I think that is an invaluable way to figure out, hey, who else is working on this? Who can I find who wants to advance what I believe in? So pick something particular, look for people who believe in that as well. Don't adopt everything else they believe in. Fight for what you care about. Two things. Number one, more things are political than people expect. If you want to find out what you care about, more things are political than people expect. Somebody could be into, they didn't get a PS5 because of this chip shortage. That's a political issue, right? And they might know so many things about, okay, well, the supply chain is like this. I hear that people on these continents are getting one. They've been tracking it for so long. They think, well, this is just about video games. No, it's about international relations, right? It's about global trade policy. Somebody cares about, I don't know, something else that might be political, a certain author's book being banned in some school. Maybe they're just a fan of that series, and they find out, hey, this has been, there's a dispute going on. This person doesn't want to publish on Audible anymore. They don't want their books going to Audible. That's a political issue as well. You have a bit of a cartel situation going on. This is a matter of, domestic trade, but still regulation of an industry. How can the government intervene? Does the government have to intervene, or have to intervene, I should say? If it is being banned in certain school districts, they're taking them out of the libraries. They don't want it to be a part of a curriculum. Maybe that's an issue that they want to investigate more in. And the second piece is, consider things as political even if you don't immediately believe them to be. Second of all, learn about them, right? If you're in an institution of an undergraduate education, graduate education, necessarily you are around people who want to learn something new, and necessarily you are in a classroom wherein the person who's going to be talking the most is somebody who, first of all, is more educated than you are, and second of all, they want to teach, right? They have so many different questions and answers themselves. Wouldn't it be great if you sat down and thought to yourself, well, what's really going on? Not just in a classroom setting, just leverage office hours. I was very lucky that, the professors at this school would sit down for me for 30 minutes and just talk about absolutely anything from baseball to constitutional law. Again, that's a Professor Blake thing, right? But going back and forth about the Nats. As a matter of fact, I got to talk to him today if he's around. But I guess to sum it up, right? More things are political than people expect. Great. Other people know a lot more than you do. And other people are looking for the things that you know as well. Leverage both. What do you need to be competitive in getting a job in advocacy? That's a good question. There's hard things and there's soft things. On the hard perspective, you need experience as a regulator. You need experience as a legislator, right? As staff in the Congress. If you want to do state advocacy, it's best if you can, point, hey, I was at this organization, I was within the General Assembly as a staffer for this person. For the most part, just because it's the best way to show everybody else, hey, I understand the process. I don't need to be trained, right? I get where you guys are coming from. I know the part of the job that you're hiring me for. Okay, it's not going to take a lot of time for me to become an investment that gives a return. I can be immediately useful. That's the only thing that's really hard, right? Everything else is a combination of soft things that maybe you have one or two of them. You don't need all of them. It'd be good if you have at least one, depending on what you end up doing. I would say the best thing is, number one, an understanding of fundamental empathy. Advocacy, like I said, the policymaking process, nobody goes over it, but it is a fundamentally emotional act, right? People never enact something into law or regulation because, well, you have a really good solution here. They act because there's a giant problem. And the ability to convey that problem and, for lack of a better term, scare people into thinking, well, this is something that needs to be solved. you need to be an empathetic person. Good communication. I'd like to tell everybody, maybe you don't consider me one, but objectively speaking, I am a professional writer. I spend most of my day writing things down. The ability to make an argument, that comes with it, right? Connections to people who are within the place in which you are advocating for. If you care about, let's say, LGBTQ issues, right? That's something that if you can say, well, I have all of these connections to these communities in particular, these legislators and these offices, these organizations of staff, that's very useful. If you're working on intelligence issues, coming out of that community, knowing what they're doing, knowing people who are working in the various offices and their workflow, that helps, right? You don't need it by far, right? I work for physicists. I have no connection to the scientific community, but it does help. What else? I'd say the last thing that is one of these soft skills is an ability to make connections between different issue sets and an ability to build a coalition as a result of that. And what do I mean by that? If I can see the semiconductor issue is not just a matter of, Intel and TSMC fighting it out, but also this has downstream effects for everybody from Toyota to Sony to Raytheon, to the schools in Missouri that are going to be using Chromebooks instead of iPads because there's a shortage of one or the other, right? You can really start to connect things and consider, hey, what if we all work on this issue together instead of independently? People underestimate how powerful a cold email is. But if you can get, let's say, the NEA, the NAACP, and the Ford Motor Company in a room together, and you're all talking about, well, how do we train the next generation of physicists? That's a lot more powerful than just you going in alone. What is my hope for students graduating with a political science degree from UMBC? Honestly, come down to Washington, right? We need a good pipeline. Respectfully, I've worked with a lot of people who go to a school that is more internationally renowned that are no different than the people that I went to class with. From a perspective of, breadth of knowledge, the number of things that they know, from a perspective of their ability to make decisions based on what they know, to process their memory into active cleverness. There's some incredibly smart people at this school. The pipeline just isn't there, right? You end up hiring somebody at Harvard because that is some endorsement. Hey, this person has a degree from this fancy place. There's no better or worse nature. It's as much of a gamble as anywhere else. A lot of people at this school, they want to work in the state, and I understand that. And I appreciate that. I love Maryland. Maryland did a lot of things for me, but we can do a lot for Maryland on the federal stage as well as on the state stage. If you're looking at internships, right, leverage the fact that you are 45 minutes away from the Capitol building at all times of the year. A lot of people end up hiring staff, interns in the spring and the fall just because, well, they don't have anybody from their home state. Their home state might be in the Midwest. It might be outside of the continental United States, and they just don't have an opportunity to bring in their own constituents to work for them. Those are work opportunities that can be filled by the talent here. Same thing with all of the think tanks, same thing with every single one of, the nonprofit societies and professional organizations, the trade associations. Everybody is looking for smart people. And I really hope they consider just making the commute. Don't make a mistake like I did and take a class with every single professor, including the wonderful one who is interviewing me here today, And really, 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 I do mean this. If you ever think to yourself, hey, I'm not in a good position right now to make an impact, you'd surprise yourself. You'd surprise, maybe it won't be as broad as you expect, but you can move the needle more than you might think.